Next discussion is all about data readiness for agentic disruption, preparing your data, governance and ecosystem for the AI agents that act on their own. Obviously, AI is moving quite quickly. We used to talk a lot about generative AI. The current sort of buzz phrase is all about agentic AI. So those systems that are capable of reasoning, decision-making and action. That gives the public sector a new readiness challenge. So how can government prepare for all of that? We're going to explore what agentic disruption means for things including data strategy, public trust and accountability. Again, two great speakers to help us navigate all of that. We've got Jim Stamp, who's the Head of Technology at MadeTech, and Sumitra Varma, who's Deputy Director for Data Engineering, Data Science and AI at the Ministry of Justice. Again, I'm going to go to each of them for some opening thoughts on what is a huge topic and a really important one. We'll then have some conversation on the panel and we'll come to questions from you, the audience, with mics, and also do keep those questions, excellent questions, flowing on Slido as well. So data readiness for agentic disruption. Sumitra, should we go to you first?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Thank you, Gavin. So firstly, thank you for having me here. This is an honour. It's lovely to be here. And actually, I just realised the first time I've been to Think Data for Government, so really enjoying it so far. When I first read the topic that I was invited to speak about, to be a part of the panel for, the first thing was, are we ready? You know, where are we on this journey? When we think about AI, everyone's excited about it. You've got senior leaders, you've got government, you've got most people really excited about AI, but agentic AI is taking it another level. We are really talking about autonomous agents that can reason and can think. And I think it made me think about where we are on this journey and what we need to do in order to be ready for it. So if you think of AI as that last layer that you put on top, the cherry on the cake, if you like, on the very top, it's about the data and the foundations that you have below it and how much you can clean that data up or keep it ready for the next step, which is actually allowing agents to think for themselves. And I'm sure we'll go into this in a lot more detail, so I won't take up too much time, but I think we have to think of it as a journey, and we're now at the point where we are learning about how to prompt. Most people, would be using Copilot and ChatGPT and other AI tools out there, and we are prompting. What if you didn't need to prompt? What if you could just tell an AI tool, go and do this. This is what I want you to do. How much would you trust it? And I think that is what this conversation really will boil down to.
Great. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I think context is king. I think people are advising us to stop learning prompt engineering and just do context engineering, and I think that's not true. I think we still need to be good at prompting, to your point. I think to not repeat the conversations that we've already had this morning, I think data quality needs to be known. I think you were right, Jenny. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It's that you know whether it's good or bad. And I think AI, large language models and agentic are actually quite good at coping with bad data as long as they know it's bad data. And so that context, the more information that you can give the agents, the more clarity around what you're asking them to do, or at least the clarity around the information that you're asking them to use, is how we change this. Are we ready for it? I don't think we are yet. I think we're a long way off it. I think as a private company trying to create agentic systems to make things faster internally, we're learning the hard way that it's actually a really difficult thing to do. And the idea of it going into DWP and making judgments on people's lives scares me silly. So yeah, I think we need to be very careful where we roll it out to. But yeah, there's definitely some challenges, but some huge advantages that could be taken from it.
Great, thank you. So picking up on that, what do we need to do to be ready? What are the sort of fundamentals that we need to think about? And how do we get senior leaders to concentrate on those rather than get carried away by some of the hype? Nice, easy question for you.
Yeah, simple, right? We can answer that in a sentence. I think, again, data products. I think people owning data, people thinking about how the data is going to be used. Coming from the private sector before I started at MadeTech, and building data platforms and creating data governance and data products, attaching the ownership of those data products to the product owners who own the digital version of those data products was key to that. So attaching that data ownership to the product itself. I think if we can build data products that are designed to be used by agents, then we get part of the way there. I tried Connect. I'm a lazy engineer, right? I always try and automate everything. I'm lazy through and through. That's what makes a good engineer, in my opinion. I think never do something twice. Yeah, so I tried to integrate my agentic assistant into our human resources tool. It's not what we call it, and I won't say what it is. I generated a key, connected it up, and realized that their MCP server gave me access to all of the data for the whole organization. And I went, oh, hang on, I know I'm fairly senior in this organization. I probably shouldn't have access to all of it. At which point I realized I was going to have to create either a second layer of authorization or turn that off very quickly. So yeah, that kind of mistake where they imagine who their user is, but don't think about actually the agent is a user in its own right. And if you're not thinking about those agents as users, then you're probably missing the point of building that data product.
So my thoughts on this are, as government, we think a lot about digitizing operations. That is what, a lot of departments are keen to do. They look at this, but we don't necessarily think of data upfront. We think of data too late in that journey. We think of digitization, we think of capturing data, but we're not actually thinking of what are the questions we're trying to answer. And that is really crucial when we're thinking of systems of AI in general, but agentic AI specifically. And I think I'll just bring this to life a little bit. So last week I had the opportunity, so I should have explained, I'm only 3 months into the role, so I'm slightly new to MOJ, but last week I had the opportunity to visit a prison. And it was a whole day, and I went in, huge buzz, get to see where data is really being used, how it's being used, how the systems are being used. And it was overwhelming for many reasons, and one of them was just because of the sheer amount of things that those people on the ground had to do. Those prison officers, those probation officers, the frontline workers, the amount they had to do. A lot of it was digitized, some of it wasn't. And that made me think that stuff that isn't on that digital system, that's data we're not seeing. That's data they need to work with, they need to keep in their head, but we're not seeing. Now, if you think of an AI tool that sits on top of that, or let's think agentic AI, how is it going to make those decisions without knowing the entire data journey? And so that is that's the core problem we need to solve. How do you digitize, but when you're digitizing, put data at the core, put it at that first question, what are the questions you're trying to answer? Where do you want AI to actually have an impact? And make sure you are thinking of that along the journey. Don't add data on as a bolt-on at the end to say, now give us data, now answer those questions. So I think for senior leaders, that's what they need to see. They need to see the data as part of that entire journey, and we need to think of it from the very beginning if we really want to apply AI as that cherry on the top.
Great, thank you. I'll come to questions from the audience shortly, but before I do, I think you both touched on the fact that it is different in the public sector. Trust is extremely important. Transparency around what you're doing is really important. And often people don't have a choice to use some of the things that are happening in the public sector, which does make it different from elsewhere. So I suppose, what does that mean in practice for deploying agents in the public sector? And particularly, what should the sort of ethics, governance, trust and transparency landscape look like around it?
So I, at the MOJ, in the data directorate, we're very lucky in that we have a very mature, we have mature teams. We have teams who know exactly how to do things and what to do. So we've got data scientists. I have a team of around 90 data scientists. We've got data engineers, analytical engineers. We've also got data improvement. We've also got data ethics. We've got people who are looking across the entire span of data and not just how do we do that shiny new thing? And that's really important. because that builds trust. That builds trust that we are doing things the right way. We're looking at it across the entire span of what we need to do. There are also frameworks that are being, that are coming from DCIT, as an example, like the ATRS framework. So when we build algorithmic tools, we look at algorithmic transparency reporting standards so that a member of the public can actually go in and look at how we're building these algorithmic tools, which do amazing stuff, but nobody knows how they do it. So this is your way to go and sort of look at what is being done. And if you go and look there, most of the MOJ stuff that has been published, they're tools that we're building and iterating on. And I think that's a really, that's one step. That's probably one of the first steps that you make in order to build that trust in how we're doing things, why we're doing it, and why we're making sure we're doing the right thing and answering the right question. But are we there yet? No. And there's still a lot more to do in order to build a trust around how we're using people's data and what decisions we're making off the back of it.
I think transparency, as you said, is probably the thing that's most important. But I think the problem with large language models, and even more so with agentic systems, is that they are fairly opaque, if not completely opaque in how they work. I think that testing is probably going to save some of it. There are some interesting testing frameworks for saying, if we press this button, does it do the right thing? And the automated testing frameworks that we know and love from the past don't work with non-deterministic systems. Even if you turn large language models down to their coldest temperature setting, they might reproduce the same thing each time, but if you're injecting different data sets in because your synthetic data that you generated is different compared to last time you ran the test, it will come up with something fundamentally different. So yeah, there are interesting frameworks coming out to testing them, but they don't go far enough. And I think being very clear on why something is integrated is so important, that ethical framework that goes around those decisions of whether we should integrate large language models generally, but specifically agentic systems. They can make a lot of impact very quickly based on hunches. Just telling them not to make stuff up goes a long way, to be honest. But yeah, I think people forget to actually constrain them. And I think I was talking to one of our colleagues down at DVLA yesterday and talking about loading principles, loading practices over the top so that they've got guardrails, so that they've got the constraints of why they're doing the thing and how they should respond to the questions. The concept of constitutional AI, so layering a set of principles that when you make a call to a large language model, the response comes back and then you ask a different large language model to moderate the content that comes back to make sure that it isn't causing harm, it isn't making judgments on people. And so having that double call increases cost, but actually you can then start to have that judgment built into the system to say, actually, is this working in the correct way? Is it the attitude that it's got in the right push? Is it constrained in the right form? It's sort of fundamental to it. So yeah, interesting papers coming out on that at the moment.
I'm going to go to Slido for the first question. This is from a Jenny B, who I suspect we may have just heard from on the panel. How important do you see AI standardization and metadata being for agents?
I noticed Megan from DCMS walk in earlier, and we're working with them quite a lot on data cataloging and data contracts and the metadata attached to data sets. And I think that is fundamental to this. I think that rich, and I don't mean data contractors and we've got a contract to take data from you, but the contract and this is the schema, this is the policy under which it was captured, here is the legitimate use that it can be used for. And having that attached to the data set and published with the data set, whether it's open data or internal data, I think that's fundamental. And I think without that metadata, we're really going to struggle. And I think that has to be part of that, both the transparency report that's part of that contract, but also the schema, and that might be semantic description of the data. The richer you can make that metadata, the more likely it is that the agents will start making correct decisions based on it.
I think I just want to add that, we're talking about metadata for maybe say one data set, but we have to remember that data is used, could be used across government. Some of the more knotty problems we have in government go across departments. So it might not be just an MOJ problem. It might be MOJ plus Home Office plus other departments. And having that metadata is so crucial to the data sharing, data interoperability, etc. And actually, I did spot one of my team members here who is working on, the cross-government the really knotty cross-government data problems that we've got. And in order to do that well, again, metadata is crucial. I'm probably just going to touch upon one thing. So I was actually part of the Civil Service Data Challenge a few years ago. And we did win, which is yay. The project was around a modern slavery project, and it was Home Office. Home Office was the department that would own that. And we looked at the data discovery, and we knew we could solve that problem, but the issue was, where do you get the data that doesn't live within the Home Office? And that was the really knotty problem that we wanted to try and solve. And for various reasons, I won't go into too much detail here, but we couldn't quite get to the point we wanted to. We had to pause the project. But what would have helped would have been that metadata. What is the data set that exists in other departments that we could probably tap into, and how would that have helped us? So I would say hugely important.
I think all the problems that we face as humans trying to use data, agents face as well. I don't think, obviously we're, at the moment, we're more sophisticated. I'm an engineer, never say never. I think, right now we're more sophisticated. We can make those imaginative leaps at the moment that maybe agents don't. They're getting pretty good. And I think the danger at the moment is if they make an imaginative leap, we've got no recourse to correct that. So everything that we need to understand data in the metadata, et cetera, and the descriptive nature of the data that sits around it, they need as well. The problem isn't that different, really. So yeah, we just need to carry on plugging away at the stuff that we've always been doing. I'm not saying it's easy, it's hard, but yeah, I think it's the same set of problems.
Can I just add a line to that? And I think you just touched upon it, but if something was missing, as humans, we would spot it,
yeah,
and agents wouldn't, and that's where you have hallucinations. And they would make it up because they're so desperate to please you and to get to that point where they... So I think that's crucial.
It is the first thing I change every time I go into a new large language model is do not be over enthusiastic. Do not talk to me like a British person. Yeah, and actually, given the data that I've given you, tell me the answer based on that, and tell me if you can't. Because actually, telling them to tell you that I can't answer that, fundamentally changes how they work. And actually, if you go into ChatGPT and just put that at the top, if you can't answer it, tell me that you can't. It actually changes quite a lot of the content that comes back from it. And I think that's true of all of these systems. Telling it to be honest is actually relatively easy to do, but it has surprising impact on it.
That brings us perfectly to time, though that might be a discussion that people want to continue over the break. I'm about to release you to the break next door in the Great Hall. We'll be around half an hour before we come back into the room. But before we do that, please do join me in saying a huge thank you to Jim and Sumitra. Thank you. That was great.